All right, let's begin the Township of Oscoda special meeting for 29 April 2020. We have roll call.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer. Absent. Mr. Cummings.
Yes, here.
Ms. McGuire.
Here.
Mr. Gajewski.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. All right, then under reports here, I provided a supervisor's report outlining some details of what the plan was to comply with the governor's orders. I will note that Ms. McGuire has sent an email at 3:10 this afternoon with other details in it, if anybody can take a moment to go over that.
So I read the email, but I do have a question when we're ready to start.
Is everybody else ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and let Ms. McGuire speak on this.
Actually, mine's just more informational. I wanted the board to be aware of what was actually said from the audio of each of the meetings concerning the topic. The need for the special meeting, obviously, is to approve what we discussed on Monday night, because there was no board action taken to go ahead and let the DPW and Old Orchard Park workers come to work. So that was basically my concern after realizing that we did not take any motion for it. Just wanted to point out the audio comments that were made.
Oh, now I understand it. Okay, good. Thanks, Jamie, because I wasn't sure what we were really trying to meet about here. So thanks for the summary.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all. Yeah. I mean, I'm not worried about, calling them back at this point or anything. Our discussion Monday night was everybody was positive about it. My point of view is that it should have been board action before they came back to work, and thus the special meeting is what I'm assuming.
Okay.
I do have questions too, though, for clarity's sake from the Monday night discussion when we get to that also.
So I'm seeing two sides here and I'm starting to try to reconcile it in my own head here. So I get your question, Jamie. I understand. I understand what the board packet contains regarding the supervisor and superintendent's roles and what their authority is, state statute, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. Okay, fine. But what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, you know, do we need, or was there a disconnect or wasn't there? And I'm trying to figure out if there was or wasn't. I see from your viewpoint, Jamie, that because all of this information have been brought to the board for discussion and that we've repeatedly voted on it up until now, that's the contention that you're bringing out in your email or trying to bring to discussion here. Is that right?
Correct. I was just pointing out the fact that after it came to light that we did not act on it Monday night,
Right.
my feelings were that the workers that were brought back should have gone home until today, till after today when the board had approved it. That's all.
Okay. All right. So then my question then would be, given that we were all at that meeting and we heard the discussion, though we didn't vote on it, is the concern whether there was some board consensus, or is the concern whether or not they should have been allowed to come back at the call of the superintendent?
I guess the latter of the discussion, because it was not acted on Monday night. And like I said, it's more informational than anything because
Got it.
whether, because I know I understand, well, I guess a couple of things, honestly, because now that you bring it up, if that's true, that they have the latitude to do that, then why are we having this meeting?
This one well, we had this one because I think there was confusion. That's all I know. And because I
So we're
see
not
two
acting
sides
on
and I'm
it.
trying to figure, I beg your pardon?
No,
I
I called for this meeting because if there's a
Oh.
board member who has a strong discontent on something, then we should have a meeting and discuss it.
Okay, and fair enough, because my first question that I mentioned before Jamie started to speak was, why are we having this meeting? So I started to get that answer when Jamie spoke about what was going on, but now I understand more with you saying that, Aaron. So, okay, good. So now I'm getting better context here. Okay, good. So, all right. So then I guess I'm back to the question of so you said that it was more the former before in the two options I suggested. So I guess then the question is the discussion that we've been having with the board all along been a formality, even though the board's voted on it? Or is it that, I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out where are we here? I mean, should we be making another board decision to support whichever, you know, what I think the direction we all agree, we've probably have the DPW coming back and park should be coming back, but should we be having this as a board decision, or is this, when is it that we would expect as a board to have the supervisor, superintendent making their decisions? Yeah, maybe that's the clarity that I'm hearing is needed.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to have the board act on this topic. And I have some question too about, you know, where the superintendent, supervisor specifically, begins to make the calls or whatever. In the board packet, under the supervisor's report, it says that objections were not raised at the time. Vote was not required by the board to maintain operations in accordance with the inherent statutory authorities of the township supervisor. I'd be curious to be provided the actual statutes that are being referenced there, just so that we can read them and it might add some clarity as to when those authorities kick in or are viable.
Being exercised.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But over and above all that, I think action by the board is appropriate and solves whatever issues here. I mean, action
Yeah,
by
I
the
agree
board
with that.
removes all
Yeah, I
question.
agree.
So I'm going to point out here that when we had our meeting on March 17th, we went over
Okay.
a document that I created as a plan to take care of how we're going to handle township functioning of the township during a shutdown. And this, of
Right.
course, was right before the governor actually did her shutdown. So then when the governor implemented orders, we are bound by the state to do what the state tells us to do. That's the oath that we swore. And so when the governor comes in and says, these are now the precautions to be taken, or these are the steps to be done, then it doesn't matter what we've passed at that time. We still have to do what the state tells us to do. And when the state comes in and tells us that we are to maintain the parks for people to be able to recreate safely on those parks, well, then that's just what we have to do. And even though we have an order in place, and even though or a policy in place, and when I wrote this, it says here that employees are to be kept in mind to be not treated as a vacation at the end, or if you are called back for emergency purposes or critical operations. And further down, it says the DPW will operate its critical operations, non-critical operations will be suspended. Under the governor's order in paragraph 6, it says on B, it says such activities are also to include sanitary public parks so as to allow for outdoor activity permitted under this order, safe and sanitary public parks. And so then it was necessary to be able to bring in the people to be able to do that under the governor's order that was enacted prior to us having a meeting. And we need to get a plan in place quickly before that meeting so that we can start that operation, which then started on that Monday, which was 2 days after her order. And at the 17th March meeting, it was made clear that there was consensus that the board members were good with some of the decisions that need to be made by the supervisor and the superintendent to be able to do these kinds of things. Now, and another aspect of this, that not everything that the supervisor and superintendent do have to be under board approval. And in the acts that are generated from this, it shows under there such things as personnel being under the purview of the supervisor and superintendent.
I'm sorry, what meeting did you say that we gave you the authority to do that?
On the 17th of March, there was consensus that the board was going to be good with some of the decisions that the supervisor and superintendent needed to make during this time so that we did not have to call a meeting every single time something had to be done in order to micromanage this. Now, if that's what the board wants to do, then I'm fine with that. We can have a meeting almost every day to discuss everything that's going on, to do every single decision that has to be made. But there are inherent statutory authorities provided to the supervisor and superintendent, and I think every board member has a responsibility to understand what those are for every single board member in the township board. And there's training classes provided for that, and there's plenty written in the acts for that, and there's case laws that can be drawn up from that.
I agree with that, but I think if you're going to reference something to support an argument or discussion, I think you should cite that source. I think you should provide it if you're going to cite it as a reason. I think we all have our own burden to understand and to learn and to be informed, but if you're going to cite something to back up a reason or an argument, I think it should be provided. That's my only point.
Okay. So, well, but I think that's fine, but now back to what I think is the great point here. So, when Aaron was describing the March 17th meeting and the document that I know we all read, it was a multi-page document. It was definitely considerable. You know, I mean, I thought it was well written. I think it's the reason why we all decided to approve it, because it didn't seem to leave anything out. And in hindsight, I think it included everything we needed to do and have in place to be able to go forward. So I guess my question is, did we forget that we had approved it individually here?
It doesn't say, I guess I don't understand your question, Tim, because it doesn't give the supervisor and the superintendent the latitude to make decisions in this precautionary thing. It does, however, point out that that all the employees should be at home. Like Dave had referenced, I said, like in the audio that I have pointed out, that he referenced several times that they were following the precautions that were put in place. And
Right.
Aaron, to your question, you're saying that the board gave you permission. There was no motion made to give you that latitude, and I pointed that out in my memo to the board. Tim had mentioned it. Tim mentioned it, and there
The
was no other
supervisor
discussion.
and superintendent have the authorities regarding personnel and employment issues. And it says in the document, if you are called back for emergency purposes or critical operations, and the governor has ordered that maintaining the parks are necessary.
I think if we take board action relative to this, it clears up all questions for today. That's my view. Is if we as a
I
board
would
can
agree.
agree and act, we're done here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's my view.
Yeah, I don't see this as anything anyone's trying to make a like a hidden thing here. I think it's just
No,
I
not
think
at
we're
all.
just
I
trying
don't
to
either.
yeah, I think we're just trying to understand what's going on.
No, I think the dynamic is changing here that
Okay.
that
Hmm.
there are board members who want to have control over every little detail without letting the people who have been appointed to those positions or elected those positions handle those kind of
Hmm.
details. But if this board wants to do it this way, then we are
Okay.
going to have far more meetings than we have right now.
Yeah, I thought we had agreed to give certain latitude to the supervisor and superintendent in that regard. One of the items was to increase the spending limit on particular items to 15,000. Now,
Right.
the superintendent has not chosen to do that. The purchases he has brought to the board meetings, but the board did grant those exceptions for the supervisor and superintendent, along with the personnel decisions. So I was a little misunderstanding of what this meeting was all about. I thought we had discussed it Monday night and that we were operating under the virus precautions and shutdown document that Mr. Weed had prepared back in March, and that it was understanding that those procedures would change as the state mandates came about, as reflected in these.
Right. So the document that we had down here that we approved on 17 March did not revoke the authorities or responsibilities of the supervisor and superintendent.
All I'm asking for is that we vote today on the discussion that we had on Monday. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay. I'm certainly fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
Has anyone been told that they needed to go home?
No.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge. Did anybody here tell anybody to go home?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think anybody has the authority except the superintendent and the supervisor for that.
That's true.
And I have a question about voting on this. Does this mean every time we have somebody off for any reason, we've got to vote as a board to bring them back to the township, even though they're employed by the township on a full-time basis?
That's the impression that I'm getting.
Oh,
No,
that's what
I
I'm
think,
looking at.
I would figure it's just like the state and the federal government's doing it. They're doing it in phases, just like we are. So then when it's time to do another phase, we have another special meeting that takes, how long is it taking? Besides, most of us aren't working, so we have all the time in the world.
I'm glad you do,
Just gonna say.
Yeah, really.
because I'm busy from 7 o'clock until 10 at night.
It was sarcastic,
Okay, good. Thank you.
because I've been here every day this week. So.
Yeah. Hmm.
No, I think that's an exaggeration. I don't,
Okay.
I think that it should be done in sections like they're doing in other, and I mean, obviously, but when you change something that's in the virus precaution plan that we all approved, I guess, what's the point of us approving it in the first place if we're not going to have any oversight over it?
Because this was before the governor had put in a bunch of precautions on this. And this was to help identify some things so that more so the public and the employees were aware of what was going on with this. And as the governor has changed things, then we just follow what the governor has changed. But if we're going to have to go through and adjust this document to repeat what the governor is doing and then have a meeting every single time this occurs, then okay, we can do that if that's what you would like to do. And we can sit down and go through details of every single action that we are doing for the operations of the township. I think when you talked about phasing things in, that's what we talked about Monday night, that we were going to phase in things such as now we have to phase in taking care of the parks because the governor mandated that. When the opening happens, then we have to talk about phasing in things for Old Orchard Park so that we can then get that going for people to start camping in there. We talked about what in previous meetings, we talked about what was going to happen at Footsite Park. We discussed that we were going to no longer have fees for that until these restrictions are lifted. And we talked about specifically, you know, like we're not going to take care of the bathrooms in there because it puts the employees in jeopardy of the virus in doing that. So we already outlined quite a bit. And we had some pretty good consensus previously, but now I'm sensing that we don't have that consensus and that we're going to have to start having a lot of meetings to go over every single decision the supervisor and superintendent make.
I disagree with that. I think that you guys have been outlining them and we've been approving them right along. I don't think there's any problem with continuing to do that. Like I said, all I'm asking for is us to vote on the discussion that we had Monday. That's all I'm asking. We were all in agreement with it. We needed to vote on it. The motion got missed and we needed to make a motion. And that's why I emailed and let you know that.
So you're talking about the difference between consensus and a vote?
An action, yes, correct.
So even though the governor had said that it was necessary for the parks to be safely maintained, you still said on Tuesday that we need to send employees home.
I didn't say we needed to send them home. I asked you if we were going to send them home. And you said no. And that was, I said I felt like they should be, but that's because we hadn't voted, not because I don't think we should maintain the parks or bring the people back to work. I just feel like the action should have been taken by the board before it was carried out.
So we should have sent them home and waited for a motion to happen to maintain parks, even though the governor had already stated days prior that we needed to maintain the parks.
What is a few more days going to make a difference, honestly?
I don't know. That would be up to how the governor wanted to press that issue.
I don't think she's worried about our park being open in 3 days.
I'm just here to do what the state tells me to do.
Yeah, the executive order doesn't talk about how much time we have to enact it.
And it doesn't talk about whether she cares about our park or not.
So I guess my next question is, if we were to vote on this, you know, as we've discussed, is there anything else that we have to consider regarding, you know, other people coming back? Is there anything else that we should be just sort of anticipating in order to ask then the board, do we need to vote on that right now, or will we need to vote on that in the future? Or does the document that we agreed and voted on March 17th provide the authority, you know, by our approval for that to just happen?
Actually, Tim, if you look at the precautions, it doesn't really, it doesn't address the phasing in of coming back to, well, the reopening process. It kind of just says you know, you got to clean and prepare, like kind of what we talked about Monday night, and
Yep.
changing the dynamics and that type of thing, but does not tie, it does not give us a specific phase-in approach for what we want to do. Otherwise, yes, I would be, you know, that's what we voted in. That's what we said we were going to follow.
But the phase-in approach is only a topic that came in because of your reference to what the federal government's doing now. Does it have to be phase-in?
I don't think so. I think by the federal guidelines, I mean, what they're saying is allowed. Obviously, we have to follow that.
Sure.
Would you say that's correct, Aaron?
Hey, I'm going to leave this up to you guys. You determine
Okay.
what details, how far you want to take these details.
So,
Because I'm
okay.
prepared to start establishing a lot of meetings if we need to.
Okay, I got that. So yeah, so back to the point then, Jamie. So if we had something else we had to, you were talking about a phase-in plan. I don't think, back when we approved this on the 17th of March, there was no concept of phasing in because we haven't been through all of these weeks of quarantining and everything else at that time. So I think it was actually good that it anticipated as much as it did. But I want you to elaborate, if you would, please, on the concern you felt that it doesn't go far enough into how we're going to deal with bringing staff back or what we need to do to reopen Township Hall.
I guess I will mimic what you said. It is a good plan. There was a lot of people that were involved in it. I feel like, I mean, let's face it, I don't know, and if any of us has ever been through a pandemic before, and like I said, it's different. We're trying to find our way through it. And actually, quoting what Aaron said in the very first meeting about, creating a procedure moving forward, because now we're going through this, we have been through it, and that's something that we need to look at as far as like expanding, how we are going to bring people back or do those type of things. Like I said, obviously we can't do anything without the federal government or the governor's order saying that we can do these things. So I guess we take it on it's going to be, I mean, what has she been giving updates, like every week or every 2 weeks or something like that? I don't see why we would need to have a special meeting or a meeting any more than that to address those things that are being opened as they come. Or as, or if there's an issue that gets brought to the superintendent or to Aaron that says, hey, this isn't working for us right now. I mean, is there a way we can address this? I don't think, those type of things can be. All I'm asking for is that the board take action. That's all.
And my question is, how much does the board want the supervisor and superintendent to take care of operations of the township, as opposed to what the board wants to take care of operations of the township? To what level of detail, so that way we know how to proceed from here, what the board expects from that.
Yeah. I'm going to repeat what I said at an earlier meeting, that, I trust that Dave knows what it is that's going on in the township, and that if he feels that there's something that needs to be handled or resolved, I want him to have the ability to resolve it without feeling like he has to wait until another board meeting, or that we have to call a special board meeting for something to happen, because it's part of the operations. It's part of, granted, operations, a couple months ago, it doesn't really quite mean operations the way we think of it today. We're thinking of getting back into operation, but I still feel that there needs to be some, agreement of either restoring his power in our minds or reaffirming the power that was already there to begin with. Either way you want to look at it. And I feel that I feel that it was fine. I felt that what I was saying before about giving, wanting the supervisor and the superintendent to have that authority to act independently is acceptable, because I don't think there's going to be some ill-conceived plan, that gets executed. I'm sure they'll figure out what they need based on all the available information they had at the time. That's just what I'm thinking.
And I understand that, and I completely agree with that on the day-to-day operations and everything else. You know, that is their job, that's their title, that's what they do. However, we're talking about a pandemic that is affecting people's lives, their health, and that is the whole board's responsibility, in my eyes. That's all. Just to this specific, you guys can, I don't have any problem, the way you run the township or what you do on a day-to-day basis, but to me, in my eyes, this is an exception.
Okay, so if we didn't approve, or if we don't approve this plan that I had outlined here in the supervisor's report, then what? So we put it up for vote and it fails.
Why would it fail if we've already had the discussion Monday night? And you said, you know, we did have consensus and everybody was heading in the same direction.
Then I don't understand your concern.
Because we as a board did not take action. We put this plan into action with board action. We voted this in as a board. To amend it or change it should have the same consequences. It should be the same. That's all I'm saying. I don't understand what the whole, why can't we just vote on it and say, hey, we agree what we said Monday night.
Because I need clarity as to how we're going to proceed in the operations of the township, the operations side of things.
Just, Aaron,
how are we going to proceed with any change that comes along or any decision that needs to be made comes along so that the superintendent and myself aren't making decisions that all of a sudden board members are disgruntled about, and then we got to have more meetings. So do we have more meetings in advance of every decision we're going to make? Do we need to have a meeting after every decision that we make? Is the supervisor and superintendent going to be given their latitude under their statutory authorities to run the operations of the township?
I would say, why don't we, like you sat down when this all first started and you put this together. You brought all the department heads together and the executive committee to come together, and we sat down and talked about it. Maybe we could do that and come up with a plan for the reopen, just like we did for the shutdown, for the precaution.
But what if reopening changes because the governor's orders change?
Then we adjust it and the board approves it, just like we have been doing every week or every 2 weeks. We literally could have been done with this meeting in 5 minutes and just approved it and been done.
Nope, I need clarity.
Well, that's my suggestion for clarity.
I thought we had it going pretty well. I thought what was being done was good. The board members seemed to be on board with what was happening and that things were functioning well. We were making sure the cautions were taken, but yet the job needed to be done according to what our liabilities and responsibilities are as a township. But that's not the feedback that came on Tuesday.
That's not what I'm saying. We've taken, in my email that I outlined, we did. You presented, we discussed it, you called for a motion. You called for a motion was given, and the board acted on it. That's all I'm asking that we do for Monday night. We missed it. Let's just take care of it and move on.
Jamie, which item are you talking about that a motion was called for?
Every meeting that I outlined that we've been talking about the precautions, Aaron called for a motion. Monday night, this past Monday night, though, we had a lot of great discussion. There was a lot of questions regarding different things, and you know, and I got a couple of questions about that, but there was never a motion called on Monday night. Nobody said, well, I'll make a motion to do these changes. We just moved on. I'd have to go back and listen to it. I didn't listen to Monday nights because I already knew that we didn't make a motion, but I didn't realize it.
Because it was informing the board of the actions that we were taking.
Why would we change that when we've been doing board action all along?
So that means that any decision that we make from now on, during the pandemic, we have to bring forward to the board for action.
This topic was under the action portion of the agenda on Monday night too, for what it's worth.
They've all been under the action.
Whether it's been under an action item or not, and I asked the board, do they have anything else? And there was no response on that.
Well, I mean, action items are action places on the agenda are for action, and informational
And we
places on the
don't, and we
agenda are
don't
for
take
informational.
action, we don't, every single item under
No,
the
I agree
action
with
item
that.
at every meeting.
I agree with that, but
So give me the clarity here. How are we going to proceed when it comes to making decisions during the pandemic?
I think if we take action to confirm or reaffirm the discussion, the consensus from Monday night, we have clarity for this specific situation, and moving forward, we'll operate as we have been. And we've been doing this successfully for a month and a half now. This is the first time there's been a question, just a small difference of consensus versus action on Monday night. I think we're doing well overall. I don't think much changes. Just Monday night, we confirm, and if we had acted, I don't think we'd be having this conversation, and it'd be business as usual. So
Okay,
I don't think that much
I
changes.
understand that, but someone's saying that we should have acted. So I
Yeah,
want to know
I
what you guys
agree.
want us to act on in the future in making these decisions during the pandemic. Give me that clarity.
I just tried to, but you're taking exception with it. So I don't.
You're
I'm
not giving the clarity.
I tried to give you a solution, but you don't want to hear that either.
You're not giving the details to this. What
can't
decisions,
give you the
what
details.
decisions do we need to bring forward to the board every time now before the superintendent and I act on something? What does the board want from this so that I know when to call the meetings and what to put on those agendas?
Anything in regard to the pandemic reopening.
Anything regarding that. Okay.
I want to sit down with the department heads and say, listen, how's it going? What do you need? You know, those type of things. You guys could do that and say, listen, this is what we're doing this week for the reopening. See if the board members actually have input. There's a lot of different people that have a lot of different ideas and things that they could share that maybe somebody else didn't think of, that they can go, hey, what did you think of this or that? Or you yourself, Aaron, thanked John and myself and the other department heads for helping you to put it together in the first place.
That's right.
Maybe that's right. So why can't we work together here and just like try to get through this all together and then go through and make some formal procedures like you said in the past? I don't see anything wrong with just making a motion and approving what we discussed Monday night. There's nothing wrong with that.
I need the clarity moving forward as to what decisions are going to be made by the board. And you're saying anything to do with the pandemic.
I'm not going to, you know what?
You want the board to make the decision. And so what do the other board members think about that?
I don't think much changes. Again, I guess I'll try to explain my thoughts in a different way. I think action Monday night isn't out of the question. I think it would help. I think, like I said earlier, I think if we got on this meeting right now and acted to confirm what we talked about Monday night, we'd have been off 20 minutes ago. So I don't think it can hurt. Board action is definitive, and it removes all the questions we're having here as to this specific situation. And other than that, I don't think much changes from what's been going on for the last month and a half. We've taken some action relative to the virus situation a few times during special meetings and regular meetings, and it's all been appropriate in my mind. And I think action Monday night would have been appropriate, and I think we continue as we have been. So I don't think there's a substantial change in my mind to what's been going on to some new thing in the new structure in the future. I think we've been doing well. I just think Monday night, if we had acted, we'd be not having this meeting and moving forward without any question.
Well, I think I understand Aaron's point here, and I went back and I'm looking at at Jamie's email from Tuesday, 4/28 at 10 o'clock. So this morning I realized that we had a lot of discussion about changing the previously board approved precautions. However, there was never board action to change it. As in the past practice, DPW and Old Orchard Park workers should return to their homes until approval is granted. And then also the phones in the police department aren't working. Now, the first of that sentence where it says changing the previously board approved precautions. Now, in my mind, when Aaron wrote that, the virus precaution thing that we did vote on and approved to operate the township under that. And that was the most restrictive. That was at the time when everything was restricted. There wasn't much that we could do. And it was my understanding that that would stay in place until changes were made by the governor as to what the township was required to do. And then it would be up to the discretion of the superintendent and supervisor to make those minor adjustments, which is what we discussed Monday night about, the changes that have been made where, the parks are open, people can attend. We're allowed to have DPW people keep that clean and those kinds of things. I personally don't know why I need to vote to say that that's what we need to do when the governor has mandated that's what's allowed. Earlier today, I had a webinar with MTA discussing cemeteries and parks. And one of the things that was pointed out in that is cemeteries are considered parks under state law since the early 1800s. Part of that 2020-59 order was that funerals are now allowed, and with certain restrictions that there can only be 10 people, and they have to maintain social distancing. Those kinds of things. One of the recommendations was that for the parks, that perhaps you keep the restrooms closed and cordon off the playground equipment or a skate park, those kinds of things where people would congregate. That even though the parks are open, we're still supposed to mandate the social distancing requirements. So it just seems to me that we voted on putting the major part of the precautionary part of this in place, and then gave the superintendent and supervisor certain, one of the things we granted was upping the spending limit to $15,000 without having to come to the board for authorization if purchases had to be made. And in my opinion, along with that, one of the recommendations was that they would have some leniency in how they operated to bring workers back to work for whatever needed to be done. In the beginning, it was strictly for emergency situations. Well, now that's been relaxed by the governor, not completely, but for certain necessary things such as parks and cemeteries. So I'm hesitant to agree that we need to have a board vote every time one of these minor changes is made by the governor, because I'm anticipating that there's going to be a lot of them between now and probably July. The state is planning a phased in approach to opening up the state, and it just seems to me it's much easier to have the superintendent and supervisor make these minor changes and bring people into work and designate how they do it, than to have the board come in and say, yeah, let's, okay, we can have the DPW clean the parks. I mean, I don't see the need for that.
I think the increased spending limit is an interesting parallel, is a good one. The board increased the spending limit to $15,000, but Mr. Schaefer hasn't made a purchase above that without informing the board or bringing it to the board, and I've appreciated that. It makes me a lot more comfortable, and I see this the same way. I don't have a problem. Again, I think under the governor's order and the things we've done, bringing back employees to prep the parks and to make sure they're safe for the public, I think is acceptable and good. Just like if a purchase was made under the $15,000 limit, but over the $2,000. But the board reaffirming that, just like all the reaffirmation we've done on purchases that are greater than the $2,000, it's the same scenario to me. It's not required that Mr. Schaefer's brought those things to the board because he now has the increased spending limit, but he's done it, and it's increased my comfortability a great deal. It's similar to that in my mind. Just affirmation from the board we all agree, we're all saying this is what we think is a good thing to do.
Well, and I agree with you, John. That's that, you know, that latitude was, we voted on to give him that.
We
Now
did-
that doesn't
We
say
did
that
not
he's,
vote on that.
yes, we did.
For the spending, we did. We did not give them any latitude to make any decisions.
So there we are again. That pinpointed that a board member is saying that the inherent authorities of the supervisor and superintendent have been revoked.
All I'm saying is that Dave, if you listen to the audios, Dave is asking the board for direction. So if he already has the authority to do that, why would you ask direction? And then why would you call for a motion every single time except for this one? You know, you probably did overlook it, and that's not a big deal, Aaron. Let's just vote on it and move on.
No, because this stems to a bigger problem here. This
It
isn't
doesn't.
about just simply voting on this.
Yes, it is.
But I think he just pointed out what that is in his mind, though, Jamie. He is pointing something out, whether you agree with it or not. He's pointing out something.
I get it. I get that
Okay.
that he and the superintendent have some other latitudes that he has not provided that information to us. I did look briefly at the MCL. I think it's 42 that has the requirements for the superintendent if you have one, or the supervisor. I want to think it's like down in the middle part of the alphabet, but it says that the board has to give them those type of approvals to do those things, like to grant you the authority to do some of those things. I haven't read them all, but that one did jump out at me. So don't quote me on that because I don't have it right here in front of me. All I'm asking is that we continue the way we've been going. Like I stated in there, I think that Dave has brought all the information to us. He's asked direction from us. The board has given him direction. We have had a motion to affirm those decisions that they are doing. And I don't want to oversee their daily stuff. I don't want to do whatever. But when it comes to something with the pandemic or bringing back something that like, hey, this is what we're thinking, you know, like they have been. I mean, obviously, you know, I can't think of a scenario at this point, but we have literally only talked about this 1, 2, 3, 4 times since March. So I don't think it's excessive. I think it's an exaggeration on the part of somebody that, you know, because they don't want to have to bring everything to you. Well, you don't have to bring one thing at a time to us. You do like they have been doing in the past, just like they've done. They say, here are the things that we're doing. Dave asked for the directions of what the board feels like we should do, and we've acted on it. And I don't see a problem with that. There's not one problem with that.
The authorities have been granted according to the charter of the township and by the act.
Then provide me that
And
information.
by the resolution. No, I am not here to spoon feed every single little thing. You've been a part of this government process for a long time. You should already know this information. You've already been through a lot of training. I've already been through a lot of training. I've already done a lot of research on this.
Well, like I said, this is what in the audio from each motion and each discussion that we had about it.
Any other feedback from board members? Mr. Gajewski?
I've been listening to a lot of points on both sides, but I don't see where this requires a vote right now. I really don't.
Anybody else have comments?
Well, I would just go back to my original statement and concur with what John said about we granted the permission to the superintendent for the $15,000 limit, and that kind of, we granted that permission, not that he had to use it, but he had the option to use it. And under Michigan statute, the superintendent supervisor have certain statutory authorities that are in the Michigan statute, whether there's a pandemic or not. So we don't need to, the board doesn't have to grant them those statutory abilities. We did have to grant the ability for them to spend additional money. Now he's chosen not to use it. And it could be that something could come up in the near future where the superintendent and supervisor might choose not to use their statutory authority in terms of personnel, and want to bring it to the board if there's time to do that. I think the problem lies in that, you know, we have 2 meetings a month normally. Now, you know, we've had more meetings during this pandemic this month than we normally ever have. But if we're trying to operate somewhat normally, where we hold to 2 meetings a month, if some minor change has to be made to our original precautions, in what we're talking about here is what we discussed extensively Monday night, is that we need the DPW to take on some roles for parks and that sort of thing. And so I think we have everything in place. The supervisor and superintendent can make decisions on personnel. That's part of their job, and move forward. They may choose to bring something to the board in the future if it's a major change that the governor puts in place. I don't know what that would be, but that would be at their option, just like the $15,000 spending limit. We gave them that authority. Doesn't, just because someone has authority doesn't mean they have to use it. And so I think that's where I just don't see the point of, if we make a motion that we're approving what we talked about Monday, to allow, you know, to go into detail about what the DPW is doing or going to do, then that means every time there's a minor change to that, based on the governor's executive orders, we're going to have to hold another meeting and vote on it. I just don't see the need to do that.
The only other decision by the governor that's going to happen, because if we're bringing back DPW and Old Orchard Park, is going to be for the township hall employees. And we already are setting up a plan in place for that, as we discussed on Monday night. So I don't see any other meetings that are going to be required for this, honestly. And I can't repeat how many times I've already said today that I do your statutory duty. You can take care of the personnel and everything else that's under there. All I'm saying is that we started this process with it, and every time it's been under the action items, Dave has asked for direction from the board. Aaron has called for a motion from the board to make this. We're, like you said, we're getting to the end of this. What's the difference now if we can't just say the board, we are approving this at this point?
Well, we're hoping that it's nearing the end. I don't think we know that for certain.
Well, then the only thing that we still have left to approve, like I said, is the township employees coming back or the library employees coming back. Or in case the numbers spike up and we have to go back and start all over again.
So I guess to chime in here, none of us have the crystal ball, and we don't know what executive orders are coming. And to be able to maintain a nimble, flexible operation, I will do my best to keep the township board informed of what's going on, but there may need to be some decisions made. And so we're gonna be reading through the executive orders. I hope not all of them are 14 pages long when she puts them out, but we're going through to be able to filter through and what's applicable and what's not, and what affects our operations, what not. And as they come out, we will continue to react based on what the governor establishes.
So the governor's order currently is supposedly going to lift things on the 5th or after the 15th. So Jamie, are you saying that on the 11th the meeting on the 11th, we need to approve all the employees coming back to work on the 18th. Or if the governor's order changes then, so on the 11th, we approve all the employees to come back. We return to normal operations on the 18th. But then the governor's changes, and so then we need another meeting to discuss different dates and timelines and approvals for that.
Actually, that's what we've said at previous meetings in the audios. If we needed to change something, you also agreed, I said it, that if we needed to change something, that it wouldn't be a problem to change it. And we also agreed that we were going to stay close to the public for the week of the 18th and not open back up to the public until after Memorial Day, if I recall, is the discussion that we had on Monday night. Actually, if you give me a sec, I'll tell you exactly what meeting it was that you agreed with me that changing it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, that's fine. I just want the clarity
April 8th.
here. I just want the clarity here as to.
It was April 8th because we've had many discussions already in the 4 or 5 meetings that we've had about this, about making a decision before the governor has acted. We've done that. We've made it before the governor's acted and followed what the federal guidelines had said. And then that was the one where I said, well, if we need to change it, we can always change it. And you agreed with me.
All right, I'm just looking for clarity at the level of detail that you are looking for motions.
Aaron, I think everybody's doing a great job with what we're having to deal with here. Like I said, Dave has brought great information. You have brought great information to it. We talk about it. Dave asked for clarity, and then you called for a motion, and we've given you a motion, and that's all I'm asking for. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, well, the concern comes into play when you're saying people need to be sent home.
I didn't tell anybody to be sent home.
It was in your email.
That was my feelings, that they should have been sent home until we acted on it. I thought that was appropriate. I mean, if we didn't do that, obviously we didn't. It's not the end of the world because we need them. They are coming back to work because everybody was in agreement. But I still think that it should be acted on as board. You know, that's what we do. It's board. We act. It was in the action items. We've done it all the way through this whole process. That's all I'm looking for. That's all I wanted to be acted on.
Okay, anybody have anything else?
Well, under that argument, Jamie, that you're taking away all the discretion of the supervisor and superintendent on virtually everything they do, whether it's pandemic or not.
I'm not, Bill. How am I? We're agreeing with what they said. They asked us for direction.
What you're saying is, what you're saying is it needs to have a board vote, which means that everything that comes up needs to have a board vote. And that's not true.
It has been this far.
I don't believe that's true.
It is. You should. I've listened to every meeting that we've talked about it. It's been under every action item. Dave has asked for direction. Aaron has asked for a motion.
I don't think it's inappropriate that anyone want to know what the rest of the board thinks or feels about a particular topic to guide them in the formation of a solution or a plan. I don't think that's wrong. And I don't think that means that there's a lack of understanding on their part or that there's some greater sense of like, okay, now they've given up some inability to, or excuse me, given up some ability to act independently or anything like that. I don't see that here. I don't understand that viewpoint. Somehow like precedence is becoming an overriding factor here that I don't understand. It's like it's like somehow the openness and transparency is being held against us.
Any other comments? Okay, then how does the board want to proceed?
Well, I'm going to repeat what I said on the April 1st meeting, which is that, you know, I was basically saying to the board that Dave and Aaron, you know, should be reaffirming the latitude that they already have to make decisions. It's just, particularly in this you know, challenging and somewhat unpredictable time. And I don't know that that requires a motion, but that is certainly my sentiment.
I'll make a motion that we approve the decisions and that, or not the decisions. I'll make a motion that we approve the discussion that we had on Monday night in regards to DPW and Old Orchard Park. And bringing them back as far as the things that were outlined in Aaron's order from the governor, being able to come back to work and maintain and take care of the parks.
There's been a motion. Is there support?
I think I'm trying to understand it because I don't know how to support a discussion that happened 72 hours ago.
Yes.
Okay, I'll change that. I can
okay.
change, can I change my motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we follow the guidelines outlined by the governor to open the parks and keep a safe environment for the public and for the DPW workers and Old Orchard Park workers that are being called back to work.
If it's not too much trouble, could you restate that one more time for me?
It might be, just kidding.
Okay. I've got to follow the guidelines by the governor to open the parks.
In maintaining to be able to maintain the parks and the public safety, well, and I don't think the employees part was included in that, but I want to say that the employees part, the safety also, that the guidelines that we discussed Monday about making sure that they have proper guidelines to follow, written guidelines that they need to follow to protect themselves also in order to follow the governor's recommendation.
I'm very confused by the motion.
Can I read what I have written?
Yeah.
Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I've got a motion to follow the guidelines by the governor to open the parks to be able to maintain public safety with written guidelines for employees.
Correct.
Could you read that one more time, John? I'm sorry.
Certainly, yep. Follow guidelines by the governor to open the parks to be able to maintain public safety with written guidelines for employees.
So I'm still confused. How does that relate to the ability to be able to call back the employees necessary to do this?
Well, the governor, you said in your report, the governor said that we need to you can open the parks and maintain them. Well, now you can call those people back to work by doing that to keep the parks clean and the safety for them, for the public, and for the workers.
Okay. So a motion's been made. Is there support? This is last call for support on the motion.
I'll support it to move it along. Yeah, I'll support it.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Nordine. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
No.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer, or is absent, I apologize. Mr. Cummings,
No.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
No.
Mr. Weed.
No, motion's failed. Does anybody have anything else?
Well, I just want to comment that my reason for saying no here, Jamie, isn't that in principle, I certainly want people to be safe. The problem is I don't feel we need to be reaffirming the very points that we've been talking about were questioned, I think, and brought into question in this meeting. It's like clearly we're trying to make things safe and for not just the public, but also our employees. I just don't feel like this motion is meaningful to me, and that's why I didn't vote yes.
If I could make a motion,
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we give the superintendent and supervisor latitude to adjust personnel and staffing levels based on current executive orders from the governor and future orders from the governor.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there support?
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
Does that mean, Bill, that they don't have to bring anything back to the board?
In terms of personnel decisions, no.
Which would be
Regarding-
everything.
I'm sorry, I
Okay,
don't
thank
understand what you said, Jamie. What do you mean, which would be everything? What does that mean?
We're talking about like the only thing that's affecting now for the township is the employees coming back to work, not coming back to work, that type of thing. Sorry, I didn't realize you didn't
That's
get
fine.
that.
No, it's like, of course, that's why I'm asking. Yep.
And I'm just saying that we give the superintendent, supervisor, the latitude, like we gave them authority to adjust the amount of spending, that we give them the latitude to make adjustments in the employees that we need based on current and future executive orders from the governor.
So is this for like the hiring and termination of employees, or just re-engaging from the shutdown?
It would be re-engaging the employees based on executive orders. We've already approved, in a previous meeting, we approved the staffing levels for the DPW and Old Orchard Park.
That's true.
Yeah. That's why I'm asking just for details. That's what I read to adjust personnel and staffing levels. That's why I'm asking, is it for hiring and firing, or is it for just, activating people who are already employed by the township to come back to work, just looking for clarity?
For activating employees of the township that have been approved.
And so how would it relate to like reopening of Township Hall? That would be something separate and distinct?
That's going to be based on governor's executive orders. We discussed Monday that it looks like at this point we probably wouldn't open the township hall to the public until May 26th.
Yeah, I recall
But
that.
we haven't made taken action on that because we have to wait till we get closer to the 15th to see if there are going to be any changes to the governor's orders. But in terms of employees, we certainly need to have certain workers in place to begin, cleaning our parks, the cemeteries, the lawns are going to have to be maintained, and those kinds of things. So I think that should be left to the discretion of the supervisor and superintendent, and being able to do that based on upcoming executive orders. I mean, there could be orders tomorrow that she comes out with some changes. So, and they have to call a board meeting to adjust to that every other day would, to me, is kind of a pain. So I think if we grant the superintendent, although I think it should be already recognized under statute, but since we did vote on giving the superintendent the authority to spend additional money, if you want to have a vote and say we're going to give them the latitude for adjusting personnel, then that's what my motion is entailing.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call when you're ready.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine. Yes. Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
I wish I'd have made that motion an hour ago.
Is there any other comments or motions?
I do want to make a quick comment, and actually it's funny, you said something, Bill, that I was hoping we weren't going to say, to be honest, because I think more than the words of your motion, this board needed to have this time to get all of this out on the table and discuss it. And, I don't want, I just think that was very important. And I think though something that may have been painful, I think we actually accomplished the consensus that we are looking for when we as a board are operating.
I agree with you, Tim.
And I would say that, this is very difficult times. This is, uncharted waters for all of us trying to navigate this pandemic situation. And, more than ever, we need to work together to try and get through this. Hopefully it'll be soon, but I think it's going to have long-term implications here for how we operate, and we're going to need to work together to get through this. So I hope we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other motions or comments? Okay, then we are going into the public comment period. I'm going to unmute everyone, and if anybody has a public comment, let me know and introduce yourself. And there is a 4-minute time limit. Does anybody have a public comment? Okay, then we are going into forward comment. Does anybody have anything?
I do.
Okay.
Just for clarity's sake, from Monday night for the discussion, so the restrooms are going to be closed, correct? I know we talked about opening them or whatever, but I have had a few people express concern about it. So I just wanted to be sure that's clarified.
Yes, restrooms are going to remain closed for now because too much potential for exposure to employees.
Okay, thank you.
One comment I'd like to make, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, earlier this morning, I attended a meeting of the MTA webinar, had to do with cemeteries and parks. I think, as I mentioned, cemeteries are actually considered parks, but some of the recommendations that were made were that, the restrooms remain closed, that playground equipment be cordoned off, skate parks be cordoned off, because those are areas where people congregate. And even though the governor has lifted the restriction on parks, encouraged people to go, you still have to maintain the 6 feet social distancing. Now, one of the things that was that was pointed out that I mean, it makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it, was that people living in the same household, when you're out, you do not need to maintain the 6 foot social distancing. I mean, that only makes sense if you're living together. Just because you go outside your home doesn't mean you have to stay 6 feet apart. One of the recommendations was also that in the parks, a lot of parks, they're not putting their picnic tables out yet to help keep people from congregating, cordoning off the playground equipment and skate parks and that sort of thing, like I mentioned. So those might be some things that we want to consider until, a little farther down the line.
All right, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other board comment?
Yeah, I got one there. And
Yes.
this has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but it's to do with the water expansion on Loud Drive. I've already had 3 people talk to me about getting plumbers to hook up their water because they have the water line across the road in front of their house. I think at the next township board meeting, it should be brought out that this won't be done until late summer, early fall. But they're already looking to hire plumbers to hook up their water. So there's a little misunderstanding on how long this is going to take out there.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you. Bye.